Some people say that the 1980s was the very best decade for NBA basketball. You've surely had plenty of conversations with fans who claim that nothing beats the 80s and that the dudes in the league today don't hold a candle to the guys from back then. That's a debate that will never really end, and honestly, I don't want to get in the middle of it. However, I gladly admit that the 80s had a plethora of amazing stars that lit up the court and the scoreboard nightly. Some of them are still in the limelight, and others have faded away into the history books. So what happened to them, and where are they now? Now, it's important to remember that we aren't going to take a look at all of the biggest stars from the 80s. We all know what Charles Barkley is up to because we see him on TNT regularly. The same is true with Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and others. Instead, let's take a deeper dive on players who faded away a little bit. Karl Malone is still considered one of the best power forwards of all time, and he spent quite a long time proving it. Malone played in the NBA from 1985 to 2004. He spent his first 18 seasons with the Utah Jazz and then spent just 1 year playing for the Los Angeles Lakers, but time had caught up with Malone and he had to call it a day after that. Since then, Malone has been super busy. After a few years enjoying his retirement, he took a job as a director of basketball promotion and strength and conditioning coach at Louisiana Tech, and then also returned to the Jazz a few years later to help as a coach for a new class of up-and-coming big men. The mailman is also a businessman and owns a bunch of companies throughout Louisiana and Utah. He seems to have a strong focus on fast food and is the co-owner of a few Burger King franchises as well as Arby's and Teriyaki Grills. He has also put his money into a few car dealerships too. Can you imagine pulling up to a car dealership lot and seeing Karl Malone walking out trying to sell you a new ride? Clyde the Glide. Come on, you knew we were going to talk about Clyde. And we have to. I mean, he was easily one of the best NBA stars to come out of the 80s. The 10-time All-Star is now a member of the Hall of Fame and NBA's 75th anniversary team. We all remember the hard work he did with the Portland Trail Blazers and how he ultimately earned his only championship with the Houston Rockets in '95, more than 10 years after joining the league. What did Clyde do after he put his NBA career behind him? Well, he easily transitioned over to coaching, leading his alma mater, the University of Houston, for 2 seasons. He didn't end up with the best record as a coach, pulling in 19 wins and 39 losses, and decided to resign and spend more time with his family. Speaking of that family, they run family barbecue restaurants in Houston, called Drexler's, of course. Clyde has been known to pop in from time to time and get his picture taken with adoring fans, but from a quick Google search it seems to have shut down. Clyde also does some investing work with his own real estate firm, Drexler Holdings. And yes, you remembered correctly. He appeared in Dancing with the Stars in 2007 and Celebrity Apprentice in 2010. He was the 4th contestant voted off Dancing with the Stars, proving that even though he had moves on the basketball court, he didn't on the dance floor. Mark Aguirre was one of the most prolific shooters in the league back then. For his career, he put up 23.8 points per game and ended up winning 2 championships with the Detroit Pistons in '89 and '90. By the time 1994 rolled around, Aguirre was done playing basketball. Since then, he's received several big honors, including being inducted into the College Basketball Hall of Fame in 2016 and having his number 24 retired by DePaul University, too. Aguirre tried his hand at coaching, as many ex-players do. He teamed up once again with his old teammate Isaiah Thomas when Thomas was leading the New York Knicks. Well, we all remember how Thomas's time with the Knicks went, and Aguirre didn't stick around with the organization for long. In 2016, Aguirre turned heads when he became president of a new league called the Champions Basketball League. Not to be confused with the European Champions League, this one allows former NBA players to find success on the court again. Aguirre remained with the league for a few years, but has since moved on. You might not remember him, but Walter Davis holds a special place in the history of the Phoenix Suns. For a time in the 80s, he was one of the hottest stars in the league. Right out the gate, he was averaging 24 points a game after being drafted in 1977, and he even won the 1978 Rookie of the Year. Davis also set an all-time NBA record in '83 when he scored his first 34 points before finally missing a shot. To this day, he is still the Suns' all-time leading scorer with 15,666 points. My man was on a tear, and the future looked bright. Sadly, his career was upended by frequent drug problems and the legal issues that followed because of them. Things between him and the Suns got ugly, and they chose not to re-sign him in 1988 when he was still only 33. So instead, Davis moved on to the Denver Nuggets and then retired in 1991. After retiring, Davis stayed on the straight and narrow and was a broadcaster for the Nuggets and also became a scout for the Washington Wizards. And although there was some bad blood between him and the Suns, they were able to bury the hatchet in 1994 when his number 6 jersey was retired. In the 1980s, the Boston Celtics were Larry Bird's team. There's no doubt about it. But true fans believe that Bird wouldn't have found all of the success he did without Kevin McHale. To this day, many people call McHale one of the smartest NBA stars to ever play. During his 10 seasons, McHale was a 3-time champ, 5-time All-Star, and 2-time 6th Man of the Year. What a talent. There's a reputation that great NBA players don't often make good coaches, but that certainly wasn't the case with McHale. Following his time as a player, McHale got to work as a television analyst and special assistant to the Minnesota Timberwolves. He then worked his way up to assistant general manager of the team and eventually vice president of basketball operations. McHale would then become head coach for the Wolves before moving on to the Houston Rockets, where he would lead the team all the way to the Western Conference Finals in 2015. That makes him one of 6 members of the 1985 Celtics to serve as an NBA coach. Following his time coaching, McHale became a TV analyst and still occasionally pops up on television screens to share his knowledge, opinion, and expertise about the league. The stars of the 80s dazzled us on the court, but even legends face challenges off of it. Making the transition to life after the NBA spotlight isn't easy. The stars of the 80s dazzled us on the court, but even legends face challenges off of it. Making the transition to life after the NBA spotlight isn't easy. That's where the sponsor of today's video, BetterHelp, can help you out. BetterHelp matches you with a licensed counselor trained to listen and provide strategies for coping with change. Schedule phone, video chat, or messaging therapy on your time to talk about the unique pressures of being an athlete, or even just a regular person. Here's how it works. Complete a questionnaire about your needs and get matched with a licensed counselor in most cases within 48 hours. Schedule phone, video, or messaging sessions at your convenience. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp gives you more options to find the right fit and to switch counselors anytime at no extra cost. Therapy can be uncomfortable at first, so do it on your terms. Call, text, or video chat. Over 4 million have used BetterHelp to live happier, healthier lives. Visit betterhelp.com/basketballdive, take their assessment, and get 10% off your first month. Just like you prioritize your physical health, prioritize your mental health. Ralph Sampson is one of the most important NBA players of the 1980s. That's true for a number of reasons. First, he was the number 1 overall draft pick in 1983. He was also Rookie of the Year and scored 20.7 points per game. But Sampson's story is also noteworthy because it's a painful reminder that injuries can completely derail a very promising career. He was an undeniable phenomenon in the beginning and actually appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated 6 times in a span of fewer than 4 years. After being the top pick in '83, Sampson lit up the floor for the Houston Rockets. Things were going really well until 1986 when a knee injury sidelined Sampson. He was never the same again. He would later go on to play for the Sacramento Kings and Washington Bullets, but eventually retired in 1992, unable to overcome the damage to his knee. Sampson was still a young guy when he said goodbye to the NBA, so he kept busy. He founded the consulting firm The Sampson Group in 2005 and then went on to create the Winner's Circle Foundation, an organization that helps young people achieve and maintain long-term success. He also published a book called The Ralph Sampson Game Plan, which is all about how to become a great player at a young age and then stay that way. Another crucial part of the dominant Boston Celtics in the 1980s, Robert Parrish was an absolute beast for years. In fact, he played as a center in the league for 21 seasons and is still tied for the second most seasons in league history. To this day, no one has beaten his NBA record of 1,611 games during his career. The brightest part of Parrish's career came during his time with the Celtics, where he won 3 championships. For the decade, he had the most rebounds and the second most blocks, behind only Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So where did he go after he retired? Parrish obviously had a desire to coach, just like his old teammates Larry Bird and Danny Ainge. In 2001, he was the head coach of the minor league team, the Maryland Mustangs. He did pretty well in that position too, leading the team to 19 wins and 11 losses. However, he only lasted there for a year. His old buddy Kevin McHale attempted to get Parrish a job with the Minnesota Timberwolves, but wasn't able to find a position for him. Parrish had made no secret of his desire to serve as a coach, commentator, or executive with an NBA team, but sadly no one has offered him that opportunity. Being a scoring champion in the NBA is a really big deal, and our next 80s athlete, Adrian Dantley, did it twice. He was also a 6-time All-Star and made the playoffs 4 times. Sadly, not a lot of people talk about him today because he never won a championship despite all his talent. After playing a bit of ball overseas in Italy in the early 90s, Dantley turned his attention to coaching, just like so many former NBA stars do. He was an assistant coach for Towson State in Maryland from 1993 to 1996, and then moved to the Denver Nuggets, where he was an assistant for 8 seasons. Die-hard Nuggets fans will remember Dantley actually stepped up to be the team's head coach briefly during the 2009 season as George Karl was fighting cancer. Since then, Adrian has worked as a ref for high school and recreational leagues in the Washington, D.C. area. Quick question. Who was the first NBA player to win Defensive Player of the Year? It was none other than Milwaukee Bucks star Sidney Moncrief, who actually won the first 2 Defensive Player of the Year trophies. And get this, he did it as a shooting guard. He spent the vast majority of his career with the Bucks, but also did a single year with the Atlanta Hawks too. Where did he go after his days in the league were over? Well, immediately after, he opened a car dealership in Sherwood, Arkansas, but then he jumped back into the world of hoops. He was a head coach at the University of Arkansas Little Rock for a season, but that didn't go well. 4 wins and 24 losses meant that Moncrief wasn't asked by the school to stick around. He took a few years off, but was back at it again in 2006 as the head coach for the Fort Worth Flyers, a D-League team. Through that position, he worked his way into the NBA again and was a shooting coach for the Golden State Warriors and then became an assistant coach for the Milwaukee Bucks in 2011. After that, he was a commentator for Bucks games in Wisconsin and even released a book, Your Passport to Becoming a Valuable Team Player. He still looks back on his career fondly, saying that after he retired, he started to have a greater appreciation for what he was able to accomplish. There would have been no bad boy Pistons if it weren't for Bill Laimbeer. He was someone you didn't want to anger. If you did, you'd feel it. Literally. For years, Laimbeer outworked just about everyone else in the league, throwing his body around, trash-talking, and generally making life painful for every other team in the NBA. Laimbeer is still something of a legend in Detroit and was entered into the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame in 1999. He's worked with a few local businesses and has popped up again and again at NBA events too. Do you remember when he won the NBA Shooting Stars competition in 2007? Or did it again in 2009? The man could still ball even in his 50s. Laimbeer has also spent a lot of his post-NBA career coaching for the WNBA. He led the Detroit Shocks, New York Liberty, and Las Vegas Aces. Laimbeer toyed with the idea of coaching in the NBA, but he has made it clear that his days of standing on the sidelines are over. Instead, he spends his time on his family farm in Michigan. Sounds like a rather chill life for someone who used to be one of the toughest, loudest, and most explosive players in the league. Let's stick around with the 80s Pistons for a bit longer. You remember Joe Dumars because he was part of perhaps the best backcourt in the league during that decade. Alongside Isaiah Thomas, Dumars put the rest of the Eastern Conference on notice again and again during his 14 years in the league. We've talked a lot about just how tough the Pistons were back then, so perhaps it's fate that Dumars is now in charge of making sure today's teams don't act like his teammates used to. That's because he's the executive vice president and head of basketball operations for the league. In other words, when a player is disciplined for on-court action, Dumars is in charge of the punishment. Kind of ironic, isn't it? Before he got that high-ranking position, Dumars was a pivotal part of the Pistons, working behind the scenes as the president of basketball operations starting in 2000. He did so well in this job that he was voted NBA Executive of the Year and then helped create the Pistons squad that won the 2004 championship. Years later, he stepped away from the Pistons and spent some time as a special advisor for the Sacramento Kings, but then the NBA came calling and offered him the job that he has now. Back in the 80s, Alex English could score, and he could score a lot. He was never a huge defensive threat, but the man could put the ball in the bucket again and again with ease. Playing for the Denver Nuggets from 1979 to 1989, English helped his team make the playoffs 9 times in a row and earned 8 All-Star appearances. He also had the highest point total of any NBA player in the 80s. See, he could shoot. Since retiring, English has been all over the place. He spent years as the head coach for the D-League team, the North Charleston Low-Gators, and then joined the coaching staff of the Atlanta Hawks, and then moved on to the Philadelphia 76ers, Toronto Raptors, and Sacramento Kings. But his life isn't only about basketball. English is also an actor. After appearing in Amazing Grace and Chuck in 1987, he played the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers in the Whoopi Goldberg comedy Eddie, and also appeared in a couple of projects directed by his son, Alex Jr. He also owned Wendy's franchises in South Carolina, too. All these years later, Alex English just doesn't stop. Even though a lot of these guys were huge icons of the league back then, we don't talk about many of them today. As you can see, most of them have stayed very busy since stepping away from the NBA. Anyways, let's take a walk down memory lane with our deep dive into the career of Larry Johnson. You remember Larry Johnson, right? Grandmama? Like all of these guys, he shaped the game during his years in the league, and our video showing right here talks all about it.